Yeah, so take us through Falun Gong history a little bit. It's my understanding that for a good period of time in China,
Yes.
it was a movement, if you want to call it that, that grew and that was accepted, tolerated by the communist government. But then there was at some point where the government said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, they've crossed a line" or what have you, and they started opposing this. So just tell us that brief history.
Absolutely. Well, through the 1990s, Falun Gong garnered support from numerous Chinese government agencies as a meditation practice deemed to improve public health and morality. However, on July 22nd, 1999, a massive campaign of suppression was launched. So, as you said, what went wrong? Because between 1992 and 1998, the numbers, Jim, just grew so quickly. One out of every 10 Chinese national citizens were practicing Falun Gong. That was more than half of upper class society. The seven highest ranking officials of the government were practicing Falun Gong in their families. The military generals, the military soldiers, I mean, 10% of the population growing annually. People wanted to know what was his life force, what was this huge, powerful practice that people were just, that was taking China by storm, like it was growing like wildfire. However, the Chinese Communist Party, even though the the statistics were showing how Falun Gong was reducing millions of dollars in healthcare costs, suicide rates were going down, people were living longer, illnesses, ailments, and injuries were just were vanishing. People within 3 or 4 months were just becoming more healthy than ever before. The productivity rates in the factories, the quality assurance of the products were rising as well, because when you have a happy and peaceful mind and you are treated well, your productivity rates are going up, and the quality of product is increasing. It's all based on the mind. And so the Chinese communist regime praised it and showed that between 70 and 100 million Falun Gong practitioners were practicing. But what went wrong, as you said? There are three reasons. One basic explanation for the seemingly irrational campaign against Falun Gong is the nature of the Chinese atheist and dictatorial Chinese Communist Party. It fears all groups, Jim, outside of its control. And when Falun Gong became the largest spiritual movement in China, outnumbering the number of members of the Chinese Communist Party by 30 million people, the communist regime's leadership, particularly the former president of China, grew very hateful and jealous that it was overshadowing his legacy, and he couldn't control the hearts and the minds of the people any longer. So from the mid-1990s, some in the party felt their power threatened by Falun Gong's popularity. And number two was the stark contrast of Falun Gong's ideology, where Falun Gong, house Christianity, Buddhism, even Uyghur Muslims who are persecuted now, the philosophy of good, upright spiritual and religious groups are more of a truthful, compassionate, and tolerant nature, being more kind, believing in God, following principles of heaven, principles of the universe, being kind to your wife, being good in business relationships, in society. This
So that
stood in
was
stark
not
contrast.
looked upon well by the Communist Party, the welcoming of religious practices.
Exactly, because the Chinese Communist Party is atheist in nature, hates and despises anything outside of its control. And if you know about the Chinese Communist Party, there's no limit to how far the Chinese Communist Party will go out to wipe out something or something, someone or something. The reign of terror, it's called. In German, there's a saying: many empires in history killed in order to conquer. The Chinese Communist Party conquered in order to kill. Their reign of terror, their history of killing over 100 million people, more than two world wars combined of death, 5,000 years of Chinese culture wiped out, the killing of millions of innocent Chinese girls from their one-child policy, and now harvesting alive innocent Falun Gong practitioners and others for their organs, which we can get into a moment. And they're deliberately unleashing the Chinese Communist Party virus from their Wuhan lab into the world, colluding with the World Health Organization to cover it up, to colluding with the United Nations to cover it up, colluding with governing bodies to cover it up, because of the massive amounts of money that they've been using to bribe the officials. And it's insane. To Anthony Fauci, to Tedros, they are all colluding with the communist regime. The Henry Kissingers of the world, the Wall Street bankers that have got massive blood on their hands because of the slave trade. that has founded the consumer market in America for the last 20 years. Made in China has become a slogan, and now we're slowly getting made in America back to work. But yeah,
Well,
this
get
is
into all that. That was a mouthful, but I want to get into all that.
mouthful.
But
Yeah,
but
exactly.
back to Falun Gong and their break with with the Chinese government. Chinese
Yeah,
government tolerating it, accepting it, if not promoting it, and then
right.
suddenly opposing it in 1999. Was it about their leadership? Was there people in Falun Gong that were speaking out against the Communist Party prior to that time, and that helped precipitate it?
When the persecution started in July 1999, the Chinese regime called Falun Gong the biggest threat to national security since Tiananmen Square 10 years before. You saw the Tiananmen Square massacre. The Chinese Communist Party is an evil reign of terror. It's a wicked gang of scoundrels that has killed millions of people, has suppressed brutally their own people, and are still doing it to this day. And when Falun Gong brought back the ancient things of China, the people wanted it. People wanted to be more free, independent, and gain a self-sovereignty of their own lives outside of the control of the communist regime. See, we don't know as Americans, we don't know how abnormal it is in communist China. It's abnormal in communist Vietnam as well. I've been living here for about a year or two. Um, but you should be very grateful that you are living in a free country, because in communist Vietnam and communist China, particularly, as well as North Korea, you are controlled by the state. You are owned by the state. You are a slave to the state. And when Falun Gong broke that slave mentality by bringing the ancient values back into China and brought people a will to become more free and independent, as well as health and longevity, the Chinese Communist Party declared war on Falun Gong, particularly the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. They demonized Falun Gong. They staged a self-immolation in 2001, where they set 4 people on fire and a little girl, and claimed that this was Falun Gong practitioners, that they killed themselves and they burned themselves, basically turning Tiananmen Square into a movie set. They started to slander Falun Gong in their centralized television agencies and their newspapers. And this was all the work of the president of the Communist Party at that time, Jiang Zemin, when the persecution began, was seeking a way to consolidate his own power while also eliminating the largest movement of thought in recent history. So to achieve his goals, he had to do one thing, and that was incite hatred. So a $1 billion a year propaganda machine was launched by the president of China at that time, the military dictator, in the 1990s, by 1999, and the complete crackdown and forbidden and ban of Falun Gong commenced with the secret police, the military.
And did they label the group as a terrorist group?
A terrorist cult, yes. Just like they labeled the Dalai Lama a terrorist cult, and he has been banished. Just like they've labeled the Uyghur Muslims and the House Christians as terrorists.
So
They've
what?
all had to,
I
yeah,
can certainly understand why they saw this group as threatening,
yeah.
uh, giving people independent minds, etc. So, what were they? What propaganda were they using in telling the Chinese suddenly that this group is a bad group?
The
What did
first thing they do,
the group of?
the first thing they were constantly, day after day, night, morning, demonizing Falun Gong on their central television, poisoning the minds of the Chinese people. Um, and the biggest staged propaganda scene was the self-immolation in Tiananmen Square on 2001,
So they were
where
staging
they
this as if Falun Gong was behind this,
exactly.
when in fact they had nothing to do with it. It was staged by the government to make them look bad.
Exactly, false fire. It's called false fire documentary. If people can look it up on YouTube, false fire. It's debunked. You can actually see the communist officials setting the whole thing up. It's staged completely. It was debunked, but this severely poisoned the minds of the Chinese people. You can also see you would also see videotapes and books of Falun Gong, just like what happened in Nazi Germany, being burned, being there was book burnings, there were cassettes being destroyed.
China went
Um,
from, you said, 70 to 100 million followers, right?
yeah,
To
yeah.
what would you say it is today? I presume there's still followers of Falun Gong in China.
underground. Yes, there was about 100 million at the time. And now, with the amount of death that has been caused because of the communist regime's brutality against them, and now the forced organ harvesting hundreds and thousands a year, Jim.
We're going to get to that, but as far as, like, for instance, I just want to get a feel for to what
Right.
extent Falun Gong still exists. So before, you used to be able to openly engage in these meditative practices out in the open in a park in China, right?
Yes.
Now, I presume that doesn't exist at all. It's all been driven underground, or it still exists to some extent.
It does exist to some extent. They've been driven underground, just like the house Christians, like the Uyghur Muslims. Yet there's probably about at least 70 to 100 million still in China practicing. Very courageous people, I tell you. I've met many Falun Gong practitioners from China, and they're just such courageous people. The Chinese people, as well as the Vietnamese people, are incredibly tenacious. So yes, there is still a big movement, but it's all underground. I mean, can you imagine suppressing 100 million people?
And
Only, yeah,
how many would you say have been arrested?
millions, millions. I mean,
Millions of
when
Falun Gong, and this is what, knocking on their door and yanking them out of their apartment, or what?
yes, because there's such a surveillance state, and also the amount of Falun Gong petitioners that went to protest. A lot of them didn't give their alias. They went on aliases. So the Chinese communist regime, which is yanking them out of their work, yanking them out of their homes. A lot of them went to protest and were just rounded up in
And
mobile execution vans.
is there a particular law that they're claiming that these people are breaking?
That's the thing. The Chinese Communist Party can break and make you in a heartbeat. There is no laws against. Uh, there is no laws of freedom. There's no constitution. There are no checks and balances. There is no private property. There are no gun rights. There is nothing.
But
The
there's crimes.
communist,
I'm just curious. Are they charging them with a crime?
not at all. No crimes.
They're not
Just
even
round them
charging
up.
with a crime.
No, this is like what happened with the Nazis. This is rounding up people, setting them to state-mandated hospitals and
They're saying
detention
you're part of
centers.
a terrorist organization. We've labeled this
That's
terrorist. You're part of a terrorist organization that is inherently illegal, I guess, right? And so based on that, we're locking you up because you're a threat to the country.
So yes, on June 10th, 1999, 1 month before the complete crackdown of Falun Gong, the Chinese Communist Party president Jiang Zemin launched a Gestapo-type agency, just like Hitler did in Nazi Germany, to eradicate and declare Falun Gong an evil, sinister cult, and we're going to kill them and bankrupt them within 3 months and use them as raw material to fund our final solution campaign.
Let me ask you this question
So on
about the.
June 10th, yeah.
Well, sorry. Let me ask this about the approximate 100 million. Are they spread throughout China? Are they in Shanghai and Beijing, et cetera, or are they mostly in a particular region of China?
All over China, but there are definitely pockets which are more concentrated, like Highland in the south, in the north, Shanghai, Beijing, Shandong, all over China,
So it's not
all over China.
their ethnic area, et cetera. It is Chinese people spread across China. Uh-oh.
Yes,
Oh, sorry, you froze up.
spread across China. The majority of the Han Chinese, yes, yes.
And as far as imprisoning them, where are these prisons? Are they all over China also, or are they all sent to the same place?
They are all over China. Actually, when the Falun Gong persecution began in 1999, Jim, the Laogao system skyrocketed. This is the labor camp system. Over 250 concentration camps, 36 death camps, and over 800 hospitals, just to name a few, were operating by the Chinese Communist Party. And millions of Falun Gong practitioners, at least 2/3 of the inmates of the labor camp system were Falun Gong practitioners. That's a huge number. As declared by the former vice president of the European Parliament. Now, the numbers are shocking. The evidence is confirmed, but it's hard to believe. This is not some rabbit out of the hat. This is not some kidney in the bathtub theory. This is full-on genocide. This is cold genocide, where it is a multi-dimensional genocide, Jim, where the the destruction of Falun Gong practitioners is not only physical but psychological, social, and spiritual. So it is subtle in terms of visibility, and it is normalized. That is the key. A hot genocide is just killing, like in Rwanda, 80,000 people hacked to death in a matter of 7 days before the Tutsis came in with ammunition and drove the Hutus back. Just killing. The persecution of Falun Gong is normalized, and this has been going on for 20 years. So it is normalized in society. So the propaganda, the demonization, the vilification, the dehumanization, the marginalization, the scapegoating is all normalized for the Chinese people to accept that this is normal.
So the
And
Chinese people, this is not hidden from them. They know that Falun
genocide of Falun Gong.
they know that Falun Gong people are being put in prison, correct?
Jim, are you there?
Yeah, you know what? It's been a little choppy, Mitchell, for the past couple of minutes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. We can always try restarting it sometimes, but I think this is
Okay.
good. Oh, my question was this imprisonment of Falun Gong members. This sounds
Yes,
to me as if it is fully known by the Chinese population. This is not something that they're secretly doing. They're doing it out in the open.
exactly. Exactly, and this is the demonization. This is the normalization of the genocide that is going on. They don't know about the forced live organ harvesting, which we'll get into in a minute, but they do know about the persecution of Falun Gong, the poisoning of and the propaganda of Falun Gong, and
They've done a good job with the brainwashing that at this point your average Chinese citizen looks poorly upon Falun Gong and think, yep, this is necessary. What the government's doing with these people and putting them in jail is the right thing to do.
absolutely, unfortunately, yeah, the Chinese Communist Party are the masters of deception, the masters of propaganda, and because the Chinese people have been so forcefully, brutally persecuted and forced into fear, they will accept anything. They become slaves to the Chinese Communist Party. However, because of the tenacious efforts of the Falun Gong practitioners inside of China, constantly creating a truth clarification campaign as well as us outside. We've created media agencies, we've created ways to expose the truth and expose the lies of the Chinese Communist Party and bring the truth to the Chinese people and the world and saying, look, Falun Gong is not what the Chinese Communist Party is saying. In fact, Falun Gong is a beautiful spiritual movement that has been given incredible awards. The Mr. Lee, the founder, has been nominated for 5 Nobel Peace Prizes. This is not some kind of demonic cult. And on top of it, the communist regime has declared a venomous campaign of lies and bloodshed against it and killing them for their organs. And now the Chinese people are waking up more and more to what is going on. So now, unlike before, the Chinese people are now realizing what the communist regime is doing, just like they're realizing what was going on in Hong Kong, just like what they're realizing what they've done to cover up the virus in China that they deliberately unleashed. It's called the Chinese Communist Party virus for a reason. So yeah, Jim, it's all coming out now, and this is the truth is being broadcast into China more and more, and the Chinese people are now waking up and are now learning about the truth about Falun Gong, about the CCP virus, about Hong Kong, about Taiwan, about the West, because communist regime has also demonized America as evil and as Satan or the devil of the world, but yet they are the ones that are the red reign of terror, the red devil.
Is it fair to say that Falun Gong's objectives have kind of changed? That they weren't looking to overthrow the Communist Party. They were just being there as a spiritual outlet for people, meditative, etc. And as you said, it was people were gravitating to it, and it was making them healthier and better workers, etc. And it wasn't a revolutionary movement, but now it is essentially the Communist Party has declared war on it, and this has turned now into a political movement where it's Falun Gong versus the Communist Party. And is it fair to say that Falun Gong at this point has now, in fact, gotten political and wants to see this Communist Party ousted in China?
Well, I would say yes. I would say that because of the brutality against the Falun Gong practitioners, as well as the demonization of the practice, what would you do, Jim, if your parents or your family were ousted, your businesses cancelled, your children tortured and taken from you? You would mount a peaceful offensive to expose this evil. What I love about the Falun Gong practitioners, and I'm a Falun Gong practitioner myself. I've been practicing for about over 15 years as coming from a Jewish Christian family. I love the Christian values. I believe in God. Like I said, it doesn't affect me in any way in that terms. But what I love about Falun Gong is its peaceful nature. Now, yes, we have created media agencies. I was working with one a prominent one in Vietnam before our offices had to close because the Chinese Communist Party sent the Vietnamese Communist Party out to get us. And we are headquartered in New York. I'm sure you've heard about the Epoch Times, the largest independent international newspaper in the world, and it's gained incredible popularity over the last couple of years. Yet the politicalness is not some kind of violence or overthrowing of the government. We do not want to do that. That's not the mission. The mission is to clarify the truth and to uphold the good name and the honorable name of Falun Gong and Mr. Li Hongzhi, who is the founder, and also to seek retribution of a demonic entity like the communist regime who has killed more people than two world wars combined, from the Tiananmen Square massacre to the Hong Kong invasion to unleashing of the Chinese Communist Party to the slaughtering of the Falun Gong practitioners, the Uyghur Muslims, and the House Christians. We've banded with many other religious communities and other democratic communities to expose this evil. So we're not here to overthrow the government. I think the Chinese Communist Party is on the verge of collapse as well. They can't sustain any longer. Quite frankly, not one Chinese person supports the communist regime, and they spit from their mouth how evil it is. So this is why the tide is changing. But in terms of exposing the evil against Falun Gong, that is a duty because of what has happened against it for
And
so long.
where's the money coming from to support something like the Epoch Times media conglomerate?
All out of the pockets. I mean, it's all out of pockets of the Falun Gong practitioners, and then they sell their newspapers a subscription, and that is it. Yeah, no political
So
campaigns.
practitioners that are outside of China, I presume, are.
Exactly. I remember when I was first working with the Epoch Times in 2003, when it was first developing, and I was delivering newspapers. It was all for free, and now we offer a subscription. Absolutely. But yeah, we're not funded by any political. They have said, the communist regime, that we're a CIA-backed cult. There's no CIA mentioning of this. There's no FBI. I had to sit down with the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Atlanta, Georgia, where they are headquartered, because I received death threats and I was involved in an assassination attempt, and they broke into my car and they broke into my friends' houses and beat up my friends who had vital information from China to be exposed, of the death camps and the concentration camps in China. But the funding has all come out of the pockets of Falun Gong practitioners. I mean, this is how amazing it is. The pure, seamless tracking of money is all pure. There's no agenda here other than clarifying the truth. And
Are there any major donors that we would know of, billionaire type donors?
no, nothing, not at all. Not like George Soros or Henry Kissinger, who is funding the radical left in the United States and others. No, it's all out of pocket. It's all grassrooted.
And what about
That's
you?
what's amazing.
Are you currently working for Epoch Times?
No, I'm not. I was working for NTD TV, New Tang Dynasty Television, in Vietnam, but our offices were closed for security and safety reasons. What I do right now is that I'm teaching 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5-year-olds English, and I'm trying to open up an import-export business with my friend and my partner from India. But as far as, yeah, the Epoch Times, no, it was just all voluntary, and from in-pocket expenses,
Okay,
and then they offer a subscription.
let's go back to the prisons in China. So,
Sure.
give me a ballpark number of the total. Let's call them political prisoners, right? By America standards, they've committed no crime other than having some
Right.
independent thought. right? So, how
Right.
many political prisoners are there in China, and how many of them are Falun Gong?
Prisoners of conscience, political prisoners, millions. I mean, I would say up to 1 to 2 million Falun Gong petitioners, and that is just conservative figures. You have at least 2 to 3 million Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps, not to mention Tibetans. But I would say a lot more. When 100 million people over 20 years of a genocide and a brutal campaign to suppress these people, I would say the numbers 1 to 2 million, at least 3 million, just like the Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. These are very conservative numbers, because as the investigators have shared with me, we must be very careful, especially with the forced organ harvesting numbers as well.
So what's interesting timing wise, if I got my dates correctly, soon after the crackdown on Falun Gong is when you also see this huge spike in organ transplants in China. This was not something that China was known for before, and suddenly they've got tourism coming to China for organ transplants because instead of waiting 6 to 12 months in the U.S. or Canada or some other or an Asian country, suddenly you're getting in them. It's like what time can you get here is what China's saying when you come in, which seems to indicate, whoa, wait a minute, the way this works with organs, that means they must be almost killing on demand. So this is the documentary that I watched. It seems pretty. I've looked. I've seen that there's been multiple studies. I just read Wikipedia about it, and Wikipedia did not seem to present any contrary evidence to what you're asserting, that this is in fact going on, that there's been independent examination of this. As hard as it is to do in communist China, it's very hard to independently confirm this kind of stuff. But to the extent there's been investigations of what you're saying is happening, it's all essentially confirmed that it is true. They're harvesting organs from these political prisoners and doing these implants to people flying in from other countries and paying pretty big dollars for it.
Absolutely. And in 2006, David Kilgore and David Mattis, two esquires from Canada, Jim. David Kilgore is a Crown prosecutor and former Secretary of State to the Asian Affairs of the Canadian Parliament. David Mattis is a 35-year international human rights lawyer in Winnipeg in genocide law, and they were Nobel Peace Prize nominees as well. They first confirmed the allegations as true with 18 pieces of evidence that between 2001 and 2006, between 40 and 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners were harvested forcefully for their organs. And then Ethan Gutmann, another nominee of the Nobel Peace Prize and China investigator who wrote the book The Slaughter, he joined forces with David Kilgore and David Mattis and have now since confirmed 52 pieces of evidence that 100,000 Falun Gong practitioners per year have been killed for their organs. And millions have been locked up in labor camps, concentration camps, detention centers, used for forced labor. And this is a new form of evil. This is a kill to order on a specified date. This is not some kidney in the bathtub. There is no other legal, state-sanctioned system going on in the world that is taking a large amount of its populace, forcing them into cattle cars run by the Chinese military, sent to over 800 state-mandated hospitals, cutting out their organs while alive, selling their organs as the healthiest organs in the world illegally without any consent, Jim, and then burying the bodies to conceal the evidence, or embalming the bodies and selling them off to the body world and body exhibitions that are touring the world that have made a fortune as well. There's no other way. There's no other country in the world, only in China. And this is a multi-billion-dollar profiteering business.
Well,
And
let's
yeah,
stop at the bodies exhibit thing because I think a lot of people in America know about that. I think it's in Vegas year round. It comes through Los Angeles and something. Let's. Are you saying that's something that people definitely should not support because you have good evidence to believe that these bodies are coming from political prisoners in China?
absolutely. And Ethan Gutmann, one of the investigators, who you probably saw on the documentary, Hard to Believe documentary, which is free on YouTube, he has investigated that and has found that yes, this body world has been colluding with the Chinese Communist Party. This German fellow, I think his name's Van Gogh, he's made $60 million off this body world exhibition. and has colluded with Bo Xilai, who was the former mayor of Dalian City. Him and his wife has made a business arrangement with the German entrepreneur to gain the bodies from Falun Gong
So
practitioners
this is
and Uyghur Muslims.
A German for-profit company that's the one that does this, the bodies exhibit.
Correct.
Wow.
Doing business with the former mayor of Dalian City in China, where a lot of the Falun Gong practitioners were harvested, and then their organs were harvested and the bodies embalmed. And Bo Xilai was a very high-ranking cadre official in the Jiang Zemin's regime, basically. Jiang
So
Zemin was
I
the
know
former
that
president.
the documentary points out pretty good evidence that they're doing multiple blood tests of these prisoners, which there's absolutely no reason to be every few months doing a blood test of prisoners, which tended to show that, yes, they're looking for the right blood type to match with the person who needs the organ, correct?
Yes, forced blood tests. Actually, Enver Totti, who is a doctor, I wish you can bring him on your show. In 1995, he did a forced live organ harvesting, and he was an upcoming surgeon. He fled to London. He's a bus driver now. He's also in the documentary, and he has gone around with the investigators to confirm the evidence. I brought him as a coalition witness in London, and he has confirmed, and he showed me. He didn't want me to show anybody else, but he showed me on basically over the testimony on show that the Chinese Communist Party forces people to line up at hospitals to get blood tested for their kill to order genocide. So they are targeting numerous groups, particularly the Falun Gong. 95% of the sourced organs are coming from Falun Gong, and they've ramped up their procedure, the communist regime, because of the virus that has affected the high-ranking officials. So they are cutting out the organs, particularly the lungs, and replacing through transplant surgery the lungs that have been infected by the virus with the fresh, healthy Falun Gong organs.
Why would they be so focused on Falun Gong prisoners for this organ harvesting as opposed to all the other political prisoners?
Because of the exercises, because of the amazing health efficacy of the spiritual movements. That's why so many people started to practice. I mean, when the Falun Gong exercises are so profound, and plus the philosophy, when you live a more truthful and compassionate and tolerant life, and you practice the 5 exercises, immediately your whole body and mind change in such a healthy and psychological way. So before the persecution and the forced organ harvesting, the Chinese communist regime did research on the blood tissues, the cell metabolic processes, the DNA of the body tissues and cell and the system and the pregnant woman, and to see how psychologically and physiologically people change when they practice compared to when they don't practice Falun Gong. And they saw amazing, extraordinary results, particularly with the organs. So they saw, okay, this is a way to make some serious money. We'll kill these people for their organs, and we'll make a fortune. So this is why they targeted Falun Gong.
President Xi, has he been questioned about this? What has he said?
Oh yes, he's complicit as well. He's complicit. He hasn't stopped it. He's continued it and actually ramped it up. Oh yeah, he's very complicit. Him, Hu Jintao, and Jiang Zemin have all been complicit. All the presidents, all the premiers, yeah, are still.
One in the Trump administration brought this up as an issue.
Certainly, and I truly hope that Trump will do something about this. He knows full well. Look, Jim, this has been going on for 20 years. The State Department has known about this. The House of Representatives have passed numerous resolutions, year after year after year, unanimously. Congress knows about it. I mean, Ethan Gutman, Anastasia Lin, who is Miss World Beauty Queen, Miss World Canada, who's a Falun Gong practitioner, has been testifying in Congress. They all know, the State Department, the Department of Justice, the FBI. I sat down with the FBI in 2005, when I was in Atlanta, Georgia. They all know how the communist regime is infiltrating the Chinese student organizations, and how they've been stealing intelligence, and how Huawei and Google and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube are all colluding with the Chinese Communist Party. You've got the World Health Organization, which I call the Communist Health Organization. Huang Jiefu is a liver surgeon, and he was the vice president of the Chinese Ministry of Health. He is sitting on the World Health Organization with Tedros, who is the Security General. He's a beauty. And they're all in the pockets of the communist regime. The Vatican is inviting communist officials for organ seminars. I mean, what are they doing with the organ transplant seminars? So they are all complicit. And with the United Nations staying silent, I mean, you have an organization called Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting. There is a band of doctors that came together, and they had the largest petition in history, Jim, 3 to 4 million signatures, ignored by the United Nations, and they actually intentionally retracted the petition in order to show how the United Nations is remaining silent on this. It took Amnesty International 7 years to get on board.
Let me ask,
7 years.
isn't it fair to say, I know Trump gets credit for being tough on China, but isn't it fair to say that he is complicit with it at this point? Because I've never heard him mention this once, despite all the tough negotiations with China. And he continues to praise the president. Now, I know he's got to play some political games with him, et cetera, but, I mean, to be focused on a trade deal when you've got this going on and not mentioning this, that's got to be troubling.
I know it is extremely troubling because you have all the evidence, Jim. I mean, 52 pieces of evidence. Books have been written about. If you go to stoporganharvesting.org, if you go to endtransplantabuse.org, if you read the Kilgore Mattis report, if you watch all the interviews, if you watch the there's about 15 documentaries. For 20 years, everyone knows about this, but it's been so concealed because there's so much money. So I hope Trump really, truly, it shows us, it exposes this, because yes, you're right. Nothing has been done yet.
Well,
Nothing has been done.
let's seg into your thoughts about coronavirus, because this is what I've been saying might be one of the silver linings of coronavirus, is shedding a light on what the hell's been going on in China all this time that we've been turning a blind eye to get a lot of cheap goods out of them. America's done very well in its relationship with China in some ways as far as getting very inexpensive goods. Yeah, we've lost our manufacturing and they've stolen a bunch of stuff and violated our patents and this, that. I mean, we've been blind to a lot of crap that's been going on in China. And Trump has come in and tried to change some of that. Arguably, he's also been too weak, even though he's been much stronger than any other president. But, it's my hope that this coronavirus is really going to shed a light on all kinds of things in China, including what we're talking about today. But let's talk about your thoughts on this coronavirus. You're saying that you believe that it, in fact, came out of this lab.
Absolutely. And a good friend of mine, Joshua Phillips from the Epoch Times, he created a viral sense documentary called The Origins of the Wuhan Virus. That went viral and Facebook basically censored it. But yes, this has come out of the Wuhan virus.
The lab accidentally or intentionally?
Intentionally. And actually, there was a very interesting documentary called Plandemic. I don't know if you've ever seen Plandemic from Judy.
By the way, there's no way this video now stays up on YouTube based on what we're just saying right now. I mean, you're hearing probably about YouTube censorship and so on. And, as soon as you say that it came out of the lab intentionally, you're screwed. Probably mentioning that documentary that I'm not going to say that name again, but that documentary, you're probably screwed. But be that as it may, we'll see what happens. But tell me, what is your evidence? Because that's a very minority conspiracy position to say that it came out of it intentionally. In America, more and more, there's been talk that intelligence is saying it probably came out of that lab, but intelligence is saying that it was accidental, not intentional.
Allow me to, if I can share with you two sources that I've seen. Dr. Judy Mikovits, a virologist and former National Cancer Institute researcher. Her career was destroyed by Dr. Anthony Fauci, right? He was the enabler who funneled NIH money to China's Wuhan virology lab that engineered the coronavirological weapon that's now devastating our world. This is another source, Francis Boyle. I'm not sure if you've heard of Francis Boyle. Francis Boyle was is a professor of law at the University of Illinois, I believe, and he wrote the Biological Weapons Act of 1989 that was passed unanimously by the George Bush era. And he came out and talked about how the World Health Organization has colluded with the communist regime and found out that this is a unnatural virus, biological warfare weapon, from the Wuhan lab. This is all coming out, Jim. There's no
So
doubt about this.
that's so it's not confirmed either way. It's your belief that it was intentional. If it was
Yes.
intentional, explain to us why.
A power grab. The Chinese Communist Party is on the verge of collapse. Economically, it's done. Socially, the Chinese Communist Party can't control its people any longer. Not one Chinese person uh, wants the communist regime or communism. They hate communism. They want Western values. I can actually see it in Vietnam as well. They want the Western society. They want the Western norms. Hong Kong as well. I think this was a power grab. My sources tell me that this was a power grab inside of China because there are huge warring factors, the President Xi faction, and then you've got the Jiang Zemin faction. Both of them, the political realm has collapsed. It's a matter of time when the Chinese Communist Party completely collapses. And this supposed, as we can say, alleged, we'll call it alleged, we won't confirm it right now, but alleged communist regime's virus that was unleashed deliberately, allegedly, was what we think is a power grab. It's the last sustaining effort of the communist regime
And how
to
is that explain to us how is that a power grab? What what
to a
what
form of
what do they get out of releasing the virus? How does that end up benefiting them?
a form of control, a form of control to their economy. They wanted to also unleash it onto America. They wanted to declare war, psychological, biological war, a biological warfare weapon, and it's confirmed to us because, in terms of the nature of the Chinese Communist Party, they would wipe out 100 million people in order to save their political power. And
Yeah,
the
I
whole
get all that. I'm just not putting the pieces of the
right,
puzzle together to see how they
right,
truly benefit from this. In fact, right now, if they thought it was going to benefit them, it would seem to me it's backfiring because
it is. Yes.
the world is now looking at them and starting to question all kinds of things about China. So if this was their idea, it was a pretty bad idea.
Pretty bad idea, exactly. And we believe also that one of two things: it could have been deliberately unleashed into their population, or accidentally released into their population, and was geared to be released into the United States to cripple the United States. This is also an alleged theory as well, but it's all playing out now. We'll have to see where it goes. I'm not really confirmed on anything, as you said. This is all allegedly. My expertise is more in the force organ harvesting. But from what I have gathered and what my sources have been telling me is that this has been allegedly unleashed accidentally in China, yet on the other hand, deliberately to power grab their society and then wage war on America, because this is what it's coming to. This is, I mean, war is upon us if it continues like this. I mean, you can hear the fighting words of Trump, the fighting words of President Xi. It's just heading towards that, and please God, it doesn't get to that. But I'm afraid that something has to blow. Something definitely has to blow.
Is it correct that Falun Gong has been a big supporter of Trump and actually given big political donations to Trump?
You mean the Epoch Times?
One or the other.
Yes, the Epoch Times definitely has been supporting Trump in a way, and the Epoch Times definitely has donated. I don't know exactly how much, but yes, to the Trump administration, in order to bring about great, I guess, great awareness and stopping of this persecution and forced live organ harvesting. But I don't know the true logistics. Like I said, I'm on the ground. But yes, there has been funding of the Epoch Times to Trump. They're one of the largest donors, yes. But like again, grassroots, and I don't think there's anything wrong by funding the uh, the administration and Trump. I would do it. I definitely would do it.
Well, and it's probably not just Trump. I mean, there's
Right,
leaders in
right,
Western Europe that could be pretty influential, and in other countries.
correct, right, right.
What
And
about
it's not, yeah.
sorry? What about the numbers coming out of China as far as impact of coronavirus and the deaths that are reported and so on? Have any information as to whether they're accurate or not?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, they're covering up the numbers completely, and there's about 50 incarceration ovens that have been working nonstop, 24/7. There was a huge plume of carbon dioxide that was flowing through the air. It was actually caught on radar because of the amount of bodies that they were burning. And there was a really interesting article from I believe the Epoch Times that came out about how is China hiding the real COVID death toll of about 21 million phones that vanished. Basically, the Chinese phone operators lost 21 million subscribers over COVID-19 coronavirus, and they claim that they just changed the phones, but that's pretty hard to do because there are some very eerie reports that the deaths of COVID-19 in China might have contributed to the high number of account closings, according to the Epoch Times. But if you didn't know already, the Chinese government require all Chinese citizens to use their smartphones to generate a health code, and the digitization level is very high in China. People can survive without a cell phone. So dealing with the government for pensions and social security, buying train tickets, shopping, no matter what people want to do, they're required to use cell phones. So this part is what's concerning. It's impossible for a person to cancel his cell phone. So what happened to all these cell phone users? 21 million. What happened to them? 800,000 line users. And allegedly, I'm not saying this is the amount of death toll, but yes, the death toll has been hidden. And what has been shocking to me is when Trump had one of his coronavirus conferences, I guess you can call news conferences. The chart showed Jim the statistics of America: 80,000, 90,000 deaths. South Korea, Iran, Italy. But right in the bottom was China with the lowest death toll. And I thought that was kind of weird, but
Yeah.
this is what they do. They cover it up.
I think
They
people would be
completely cover it up.
surprised to hear you say that the Communist Party is struggling there, because the perception here in America is that, their GDP keeps going up significantly each year. They're ripping us off of everything. All manufacturing is moving over there. Quality of life, presumably, is getting better and better for people there as they build more industry. Their economy is now getting close to surpassing ours as far as total size. So help us understand. And by the way, I'll throw in, you were saying that they were able to change perception about Falun Gong through propaganda and so on. So it seems like they still have a pretty good ability to control the minds of the people. So why is it that you say that they're struggling to hang on?
Because the Communist Party is on the verge of collapse. The political, economic, and social realms have fallen. Between 60 and 80,000 people are rioting in the streets as we speak in China. Their economy is on the verge of collapse. Their manufacturing base has collapsed. Everyone is pulling out. A lot of them are coming to Vietnam right now. That's why I've opened up my import-export business. And just the simple fact of the virus that has been unleashed in China, accidentally or deliberately, we still have to confirm that, is the reason why China is also collapsing. I mean, the world, knowing what they know about China, seeing what has gone on in the communist regime's backyard as we're speaking, the videos that are coming out, has shown and confirmed, as well as the harvesting of organs alive, that they are on the verge of collapse. The numbers that are coming out,
Is that even pre-coronavirus?
that was pre-coronavirus. The numbers that are coming out of China are all fabricated, Jim. You cannot believe one word that is coming out of China. The propaganda, the weaponized, demonized propaganda in terms of the economy, in terms of just look at the CCTV, look what they are. When you actually watch it just for a second, the venomous manipulation that goes on it's astounding. But you'll see very soon what is going to go on in China. I mean, they have collapsed. And what is good about this is that once the communist regime completely collapses, you're going to see and usher in a new form of democracy, a new form of China that we've never seen before. But China will
That's
regain.
incredibly optimistic.
I know, I know,
I don't think it's going to be
I
that
know,
easy, but I would love to see it. It
I
happened
know.
in the USSR for a brief moment, and then
Yes,
crackdown came, and the oligarchs took over, and now it's being run by a dictator. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so having democracy take hold in a country that's been communist for that long is not going to be easy. But
No.
you feel that there's a groundswell there, and you think that the party will be overthrown through people essentially flooding the streets?
Yes, absolutely. And also, people are high-ranking officials are leaving the country. They are taking a large amount of money with them. I mean, it's on the verge of collapse. It really is. And there's a great documentary, a really good documentary called The Nine Commentaries on the Communist Party that I definitely implore people to watch and to read about, which just shows the death knell of the Chinese Communist Party, how evil communism is, and how the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated not only the West, but just Southeast Asia, the Middle East, with their demonic tyranny. And it's just a matter of time for this monstrosity to completely end.
Yeah, well, I would also recommend Death by China,
Yes, yes.
which was done. What's the, I'm blanking on the guy's name.
Peter Navarro.
Navarro. That was my first wake up call, and that was done about 10 years ago. But that was my first wake up call to China. It's a great little 1 hour documentary on YouTube based on his book that just takes you through all the things that are a big wake up as to wow, why have we been ingratiating our number one enemy in the world and this terrorist regime essentially, and we've been cozying up to them all this time for cheap goods.
Absolutely. It's disgusting. It's disgraceful. And bowing to China and the NBA. I mean, not only, I mean, look at the NBA with the Hong Kong protests going on. The San Antonio Spurs, I think, or yeah, I think the manager was standing with Hong Kong and then retracted his statement because of the market share. They've got a massive market share, Jim, in China, and they will do everything to maintain it. And as a good friend told me one time,
Hollywood's a big culprit right now.
huge extinction of life before loss of profit. That's
Yeah.
all it is. And because they're making a fortune, multi-billion-dollar income generating, profiteering business off the organs, the fresh organs, legally state sanctioned, kill to order regime, genocide going on, fully state functioned, state mandated, state endorsed by the Chinese military, by the highest ranking officials, by President Xi, killing their innocent Falun Gong practitioners and others, making a fortune. We shouldn't be doing business with
Last
them.
question: are any of these tourists that are going there for organ transplants, are any of them from America?
America, South Korea, Pakistan, the UK, Europe. There's only 4 countries that have banned organ tourism. Only 4, which is absolutely disappointing. Israel was the first one to do it with the Knesset and the Sanhedrin, which is the rabbinic council, and the Shiva Medical president, Jacob Levy. They wrote into law in 2008 the transplantation law that banned any of its Israeli citizens from going to China to get an organ. Number 2 is Taiwan. Number 3 is Spain, and number 4, Italy. Only 4 countries, Jim, out of all the countries in the world
So you're
have
saying
banned.
there exist Americans in America right now walking around with a Falun Gong organ inside their body.
Oh, sure, sure. To have a multi-billion-dollar organ harvesting genocide. They're also selling it back to the communist regime is selling it back to their own citizens. You see, the Chinese people believe, their culture believes that the body needs to remain intact from life to death. The Chinese Communist Party has violated all precedents of Chinese culture. They decimated 5,000 years of Chinese culture. So, because of the cancer patients and the liver patients, the liver cancer patients in China, the communist regime, and because of the coronavirus outbreak, the Chinese communist regime has ramped up organ harvesting on Falun Gong and are selling it back to their own citizens and making a fortune. But yes.
Thank you to our guest, Mitchell Gerber. You can check out his site, stoporganharvesting.org. Stoporganharvesting.org to support Mitchell Gerber and what he's doing. There's an excellent documentary on that site also. Thank you to our producer, Michael Parker. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of The Hidden Truth Show.
Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow. You can find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Join us again next week for another episode of Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow.